What's up, guys? I probably should have thought about drinking a Sonic Blue slushie before I made this video, but like I said in the last video, I was going to make a video just kind of recapping my experience owning the BRZ for, well, it has 116,000 miles on the car and I've had it for about 80, and I've owned it for 4 years. So this is just going to be kind of a walk around of all the mods that I've done to it and just kind of my general ownership experience. Because I'm about to sell the car, I figure this is the perfect time to make the video. So let's get right into it. In the front, sorry it's on an incline here, so it looks lower than it is, but I used to have a front lip. I don't anymore. We had a pretty crazy winter storm a couple months ago, and that decided to claim my lip. So no more front lip. It was just a cheap eBay one though, so nothing crazy. I have 6000K HIDs that you can't see right now, but it kind of just gives it more of a blue tint. I think it looks more modern. It looks better than the stock. I'm not sure what the temperature is stock, but they're a little bit more of a white blue color. As far as wheels go, I have Avant-Garde M230s or M240s is one of the two. They're 18x9 plus 30, and then I have 255/35 tires all around. Does this count as a mod? I have 5% tint all around. I have these eBay rain wind guards. I'm not sure what they're called. I really just kind of bought them for looks, but I guess they serve some sort of functional purpose. Down here I have the TRD side skirts that are paint matched, but then I left this little strip black just because I feel like it gives the car a little bit more contrast, and I don't really like the way it looks when it's all one color. That's why I wasn't a big fan of the STI side skirts, because it just kind of threw off the lines and just the kind of proportions of the car. So these are my favorite ones, and I think they look pretty good. I'm not sure if they're the kooky or the Zenki ones. I'm not sure if there's even a difference, but they are the TRD side skirts. Moving on to the back, I have the V-Land sequential facelift taillights. So they're basically like a knockoff of the OEM 17 plus taillights, but they're sequential. These are probably my favorite taillights for these cars, besides maybe the Tom's V1. I used to have the Buddy Club Aventador style taillights, and they kind of just look cheap in the daytime because the shell would just reflect the light and it didn't really look super good. I don't know, I wasn't a huge fan of them, but these ones are pretty good. They were like $260 on eBay, and the only thing you have to do is repin them, because I don't know what market they're made for, but you have to swap a couple of the pins that are inside and they work perfect. In the back here we have the Leg Sport Ducktail, which is probably my favorite spoiler for this car. I think it's just really simple. It works well with the body lines, and it just looks clean and makes the rear end look quite a bit more aggressive. Here we have the Porsche Beverly Hills plate frame. My friend in LA sent me it just because everybody seems to think this car is a Porsche, so it's kind of just an inside joke and just trolling other people, but plus 5 horsepower, I guess. Down here we have the Rocket Bunny V1 rear diffuser. This is a rep, so this one is from eBay. The fitment's decent, it's not too bad. Again, I think it just kind of cleans up the rear end and makes it look way more aggressive and way more modern, and the reverse light looks a lot better than the stock one. The OEM diffuser, reverse fourth brake light, whatever you want to call it, is honestly kind of ugly in my opinion. For exhaust, I don't know if you can see under here, I have a Y-pipe muffler delete that still has one of the stock resonators on there. And then I have a 1320 dual resonated front pipe, catless, and then pseudo catless unequal length headers, or an unequal length header. That's pretty much it for the car. Pretty simple. I like to keep my cars like OEM plus. I didn't go crazy and wide body it as much as I kind of wanted to at some point. I knew that I probably wasn't gonna end up keeping the car for that much longer, and I didn't really wanna completely tank the resale value. So I ended up keeping it stock body, and this is probably like the perfect spec, minus the front lip. Obviously, if I had that, it would be pretty much perfect for me. So as far as ownership goes, like I said, I've had this car since the beginning of 2017, and this is April 2021. So I've had it for a little over 4 years. Bought the car with 33,000 miles on it, and it now has 116,000. So I'm not even gonna try to do the math. I think that's like 80,000 miles. I don't even know. I'm not gonna try. But overall, the car's been pretty solid. It's been pretty reliable. The only major thing I can think that I've had to do off the top of my head is the throwout bearing, which went bad, I think around 60K. So when I did that, I did a new clutch, new flywheel, new throwout bearing, and then that was done. And it's been fine ever since. Now this car is a 2013, so I had to do well, I didn't have to do it, but they have a valve spring recall that I ended up doing at, I think 75,000 at a Subaru dealership here in San Antonio, and it's been fine. Some people are saying they have problems with it, but from what I've seen, it's mostly the Toyotas that have problems, because I guess their techs don't know how to work on boxer engines and they end up messing it up. But mine was fine, and when the engine came, I don't know if they had to pull the engine for it, but when they did it, they did the spark plugs too at the same time. So that was, I only paid for parts to get the spark plugs done. So that was, I think, 150 bucks instead of 500. So that was good. Just killed two birds with one stone with that. But other than that, it's been pretty much basic maintenance. Besides, I've had to do lug studs, which I guess they're kind of a weak point on these cars. And yeah, that's pretty, and then I also had to do the shifter bushing, which I guess I wouldn't say it broke, but it just started to get pretty, like the shift started to get pretty loose. So I did a shifter bushing, that was like 25 bucks. But other than that, that's pretty much been it. It's pretty much basic maintenance, nothing crazy. Oil changes, fluid changes, all that good stuff. It's been a pretty reliable car. So now I'm gonna talk about the things that I like and I don't like about the car. So I guess let's just start off with the positives. The first thing that I like about this car is gonna be the looks. I mean, this car is a neck snapper. Maybe it's just because mine's modified and red and loud, but this car gets a lot of good attention. A lot of people think it's a Porsche or a Supra for some reason, even though I still have a Subaru badge in the front. But this car gets a lot of attention. A lot of kids are like, oh, that's a sick car, bro. You know, that kind of thing. So it's a good looking car. I definitely think it's the best looking car you can get in this price range. The second thing I really like about this car is going to be the sound. If you have a proper exhaust setup with an unequal length header, this car can sound pretty nasty in a really good way. I've heard a lot of BRZs that are not that good sounding, but with the right setup, you can really get that WRX, STI, you know, that classic EJ rumble. And for being an NA car, it's pretty damn close. The third thing I like about this car is going to be the aftermarket. I mean, there really isn't anything you can't do to this car. There's so many body kits and aero pieces, and you can supercharge it, you can turbo it. I mean, there's really nothing you can't do to this car. I mean, there's got to be at least 20 different sets of aftermarket taillights that you can get for these cars. So it's pretty crazy, and you kind of have a blank slate to make the car whatever you want it to be. So the aftermarket is definitely a huge plus for this car. The fourth thing I like about this car is really just the way that it drives. It just is a pure driver's car. The seating position, the driving position, the steering is great, the shifter is great. Everything inside is pretty minimal and simple. There's no buttons on the steering wheel. It's just a pure driver's car that's really fun to drive. And the experience is really, I mean, anything short of like a Cayman, this is probably as good as it gets. Even just the way you sit in the car, you feel like you're sitting in it and not on top of it. Like even, for example, a 370Z, when you're driving it, you feel like you're sitting on top of it and not in it. Like this car really feels like a spaceship when you're driving it. So I think that's really cool. And I mean, overall, it's just a really fun car to drive. As far as tuning goes, I'm on a stage 2 open flash tablet 93 tune. I used to be on E85, but there really isn't a whole lot of E85 stations around here. I think the closest one is like 25 minutes away. And when the whole snowstorm hit and it was basically like an apocalypse here, there was like a week where you could get E85 and a week you couldn't get E85, and really just a gas shortage in general. So I was eventually just kind of like, you know what, screw it. Like, I'm not out here racing people. I'm just gonna stick with 93 just for convenience sake. This car on E85 is probably the way that it should have come from the factory. Not saying that the car should run on E85 from the factory, but that 230, 240 crank horsepower range is pretty good for this car. It kind of pushes it into that territory where it's like properly quick and not borderline slow. So just to put it into reference, when you have this exact setup that I have on the 85, it'll put about a car length on a 987 base Cayman, and it'll hang and run pretty much even with like a stage 1 WRX, the new generation, and a stock STI. So it's properly quick it's properly quick when you get to the 230, 240 crank range. I think that if this car came like that from the factory, I don't think anybody would be complaining about the power because the torque dip is gone and it's adequately quick. Okay, so now for the things that I don't like about the car. There really isn't anything specific towards the car that I don't like, if that makes sense. It's more towards just how I use it, and these are kind of the reasons that I'm getting rid of it. So the first one is going to be the seats. The seats are good seats for like aggressive driving, if you're gonna go drive in the canyons, if you're going to autocross days or track days, but they are kind of stiff. There is no like lumbar support, and like after an hour and a half, they start to hurt your back, at least in my case. So the seats could be a pro for some people, but for me, where I spend most of my time driving just on the freeway, in traffic, city driving, like I've never taken this car to a track day or anything. They're not really good for that kind of driving. I mean, I'm sure for some people they're not that bad, but for me, I don't like them that much. The second thing that I don't like is probably the biggest thing that I don't like about this car, and that's gonna be just the general road noise. I live in Texas, so when you're on the highway doing 85 miles an hour, it is pretty loud inside and it gets old pretty quick. So I mean, this isn't really a car that I would wanna take on like a long road trip, just due to the general comfort. And then on top of that, you have a lot of road noise, wind noise, stuff like that. Obviously, I know it's a cheap Japanese sports car and it's not going to be like a Mercedes or a Lexus as far as quietness goes, but it still is just definitely on the harsh side. The third thing that I don't like about this car is going to be the stock head unit and the stock speakers. They're honestly just kind of subpar. I know you can change all that stuff in the aftermarket, but if I'm going to complain about things that the car came with from the factory, not a fan of the head unit and not a fan of the stock stereo. Overall though, would I buy this car again? Yeah, I probably would. It's been a good 4 years with this car. It's been really reliable. It's fun to drive. You know, there's a lot of stuff that you can do to it. But if I were to buy it again, it would probably be more of a second car or like a project car type of thing where I either turbo it or I swap a K series or a 2J in it. I don't know if I would get it to daily drive it the way that I do right now. But if you're somebody that's just looking for like an easy, you know, you don't have a long commute or you don't do a lot of highway driving, it's a pretty good car. It's not super uncomfortable for short drives. It's economical, it's cheap, the parts are cheap, it's easy to repair, and it's overall just a pretty good, economical, fun sports car. So if that's your situation, then I would totally look into getting one, especially now with the prices the way they are. They're a pretty good deal on the used market. So that's it. That's my BRZ. And that's my total ownership experience. It's been a good 4 years with this car, but I have an opportunity to get into a car that I really want. So I think it's time for me to part ways with it. Overall, it's been a really good ownership experience for me. I've had a lot of fun with it, and I would definitely recommend them to anybody that wants to get into a decently practical, affordable sports car that you can do a lot to. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a like, subscribe, and when I get my new car, I definitely will be dropping a video on that, because I'm gonna do a few things here and there to that car like I do with all my cars. I say I'm gonna keep it stock and then I don't. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed it. See y'all later.